The bank manager slid the folder across his desk, and my hand started shaking before I even opened it. Inside were loan documents with my signature scrawled across the bottom, except I'd never seen these papers before in my life. The signature looked like mine, almost perfect, but the loops were slightly off. My stomach dropped as I realized what I was looking at. "Ms. Rivera, we flagged some inconsistencies in this refinance application," the manager said, his voice careful and measured. "We need to confirm whether you knowingly co-signed this $128,000 loan on your parents' property." The room tilted. $128,000. My parents' house. My name. My credit. "I never signed this," I whispered, my voice barely working. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "Then we'll need to contact the primary borrowers, your parents, about potential fraud. This is now a formal investigation." The word fraud hung in the air like poison. My own parents had stolen my identity. They'd forged my signature. They'd used me like I was just another credit card in their wallet. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Mara Rivera, and until that moment, I thought my parents' love was unconditional. I was wrong. Sitting in my car outside the bank, I tried to remember when things had started feeling wrong. The answer came immediately, my entire childhood. My mother had always said, "Family shares everything," whenever she wanted something from me. It sounded sweet when I was young, like we were a team. But as I got older, I realized it only went one direction. When I was 16, she'd asked for my first paycheck to help with groceries. When I was 21, she convinced me to add her as an authorized user on my first credit card, just for emergencies. The emergencies never stopped. Every time I questioned it, she'd cry and say I was being selfish. My father never intervened. He'd just look away and mutter something about keeping the peace. He was the silent enforcer of her manipulation, making me feel guilty for having boundaries. My older brother Derek had somehow escaped all of this. He dropped out of college, moved back home 3 times, and quit every job after a few months. But they never asked him for money. They never asked him for help. Only me. "You're the responsible one," my mother would say, like it was a compliment. Now I understood it was a label that made me easier to exploit. 6 months earlier, my mother had called me crying. She said she needed my social security number for a family medical form that the insurance company required. It sounded legitimate. I was busy at work and didn't think twice about texting it to her. She thanked me profusely, told me I was such a good daughter, and hung up quickly. I'd completely forgotten about it until I sat in that bank office. Now, staring at the loan inquiry date on the documents, I felt sick. The inquiry had been run the exact same week she'd asked for my information. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned, calculated. They'd been setting this up for months, maybe longer. I pulled up my credit monitoring app with trembling fingers. There it was, a hard inquiry from Coastal Federal Bank dated 6 months ago, right after I'd given her my social security number. My mother had lied directly to my face. My father had stood by and let it happen. And I'd handed them exactly what they needed to steal my future. That night, I called my cousin Stephanie. We'd always been close, and she lived near my parents. Maybe she'd heard something. "Mara, thank God you called," she said immediately. "Your mom has been telling everyone that you volunteered to help them refinance. She's been saying you offered your credit to help stabilize their finances." My blood ran cold. "I never offered anything." "I didn't think so," Stephanie said quietly. "But she's been telling that story for months. At Christmas, at family dinners, even at church. She made you sound like this generous savior who stepped up when they needed you most. They'd built a cover story. They'd planted it with the entire family so that when this came out, I'd look like the villain for backing out of a promise I'd never made. There's more," Stephanie added. "Last week, she told Aunt Carmen that you've been acting unstable and confused lately, that you're stressed from work and not thinking clearly." I closed my eyes. They weren't just covering their tracks. They were preemptively destroying my credibility. The next morning, I went back to the bank and met with Victor Chun, the fraud investigator. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a gentle manner that somehow made everything worse. He treated me like a victim, which meant he believed this was real. I need to ask you 3 questions for the record, he said, opening a file. Did you authorize this loan application? No. Did you sign these documents? No. Did you give anyone access to your personal information or online credit profile? I hesitated. My mother asked for my social security number 6 months ago. She said it was for insurance paperwork. He made a note, his expression carefully neutral. Then he pulled out another document and slid it toward me. It was a screenshot of a login to my credit monitoring account. The IP address was traced to my father's workplace in their hometown, 3 hours away. This login occurred 2 days before the loan application was submitted, Victor said quietly. Both of your parents appear to be involved. I'd been hoping it was a mistake, some clerical error, but seeing that evidence made it undeniable. My father had actively participated. They'd worked together to do this to me. 2 weeks later, my parents invited me to Sunday dinner. I almost said no, but I needed to see them face to face. I needed to understand how they could do this to their own daughter. I arrived early and heard voices in the kitchen. My mother's voice carried through the wall. The refinance finally went through. The payment auto-pays from our account, so she'll never even know. My father's voice quieter. What if she checks her credit? She won't. And even if she does, we'll just say she forgot she signed. She's so busy with work, she barely remembers anything anyway. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought I was too distracted, too trusting, too easy to gaslight. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn on the faucet. I splashed water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror. The daughter they'd raised. The daughter they'd stolen from. I'd never felt more alone. I confronted them after dinner. My brother had already left, and we were alone in the living room. I pulled out the bank documents and placed them on the coffee table. I know what you did, I said, my voice shaking. The bank contacted me about the refinance. The one I never signed. My mother's face went white, then immediately crumpled into tears. Mara, honey, I can explain. Did you forge my signature? Yes or no? We were going to tell you, my father said, standing up. We just needed to get the loan approved first. We were drowning in debt, and you have perfect credit. This was the only way. That's identity theft, I said. That's fraud. My mother's tears stopped instantly. Her voice turned cold. We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, paid for your education. This is the least you could do. I never agreed to this. You don't get to be selfish now, she snapped. We're your parents. My father stepped closer. The bank flagged the signatures. His fear was obvious. Not guilt. Fear of getting caught. Over the next week, they called me constantly. First, they denied everything. Then they claimed I'd signed the papers years ago and just forgot. My mother said stress from my job was making me confused and paranoid. You're misremembering, she insisted during one call. You definitely signed when you visited us last Christmas. Don't you remember? We all sat at the kitchen table. It was so confident, so detailed, that for a split second I doubted myself. Then I remembered. I hadn't visited them last Christmas. I'd been working overtime, and we'd done a video call instead. During another call, my father slipped. I had to practice your signature for days to get it right, he said, his voice defensive. Do you know how hard that was? The line went silent. My mother hissed something at him in the background. You practiced forging my signature, I repeated slowly. He started backtracking immediately, but it was too late. He'd admitted it. On a call I was recording. I felt nausea crawl up my throat, and I hung up without another word. I called Victor, the fraud investigator, the next morning. My hands shook as I dialed. I want to proceed with the investigation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm confirming that I did not authorize this loan, and I did not sign any documents. Understood, Victor said gently. I need you to know what happens next. The bank will contact the co-borrowers, your parents, for recorded statements. They'll be informed that this is a fraud investigation. My chest tightened. This was real now. Once the bank called them, there was no going back. Would you like to be present for the call? Victor asked. You'd be on mute, but you could hear the conversation. I thought about my mother's tears, my father's justifications, and the way they'd gaslit me for weeks. I thought about the $128,000 debt they tried to saddle me with. Yes, I said. I want to hear it. We'll schedule it for next week. I'll send you the call details. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I wasn't trying to destroy my parents. I was just trying to protect myself. But I knew they'd never see it that way. Within days, my extended family started messaging me. My uncle called me selfish. My aunt said I was being dramatic. Cousins I barely knew sent long texts about how I was ruining my parents' lives over a simple misunderstanding. My mother had clearly been working the phones, spinning the story before I could defend myself. I was the villain who was abandoning her struggling parents over paperwork. Then I got a private message from my Aunt Brenda, my father's sister. Mara, I need to tell you something. Your parents tried this with me 8 years ago. They asked to use my credit for a car loan and promised they'd make every payment. They defaulted after 6 months, and I spent years repairing my credit. You're not crazy. They've done this before. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. My parents were financial predators, and I wasn't their first victim. I screenshot the message and added it to my folder of evidence. 11. That same week, I pulled all 3 of my credit reports. I needed to see the full damage. What I found made my stomach drop. There was another account I didn't recognize. A home improvement line of credit for $47,000, opened 18 months ago. The billing address was my parents' house. They'd done this before. They'd used my credit once already, and when they'd gotten away with it, they'd done it again. The first loan had been smaller, a test run. When I hadn't noticed, they'd gotten bolder. I called Victor immediately and sent him the report. This isn't the first time, I said, my voice shaking with anger. There's another fraudulent account. He was quiet for a moment. Mara, I'm going to be honest with you. This changes things. This shows intent and pattern. The bank's legal team will likely escalate this beyond just the refinance. What does that mean? It means this could become a criminal matter. I hung up and sat on my apartment floor, staring at the wall. My parents hadn't just stolen from me once. They'd been systematically draining my future for years. 3 days later, Victor called with an update. The bank has officially labeled both accounts as pending fraud cases. We're freezing the refinance and flagging the home improvement line of credit. Your parents will be required to provide recorded statements for both loans. What happens to their house? I asked. If the refinance is voided, they'll revert to their original mortgage terms. But given the equity they pulled out and the other debts we're uncovering, they may face foreclosure if they can't make payments. I felt a stab of guilt, then pushed it away. They'd done this to themselves. I didn't put them in debt. I didn't forge documents. I was the victim here, not them. Statement day is scheduled for Friday, Victor continued. I'll send you the call-in information. You'll be on mute, but you'll hear everything. Friday. 3 days away. 3 days until my parents would have to answer for what they'd done. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat down and cried for the family I'd lost. The day before the call, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was carrying grocery bags and wearing the smile she used when she wanted something. I brought your favorite foods, she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. I thought we could talk, just the 2 of us. I watched her unpack containers of homemade meals, each one a memory from childhood. Comfort food. Guilt food. Mom, you need to leave. She turned to me, her eyes welling with tears. Mara, please. You're tearing this family apart. We made a mistake. Yes, but we were desperate. We were drowning and we needed you. You owe us your life. We gave you everything. You stole from me. We borrowed, she snapped, her mask slipping. We were going to pay it back. But now you've ruined everything. The bank is freezing our accounts. We might lose the house. Is that what you want? To make us homeless? I felt the old guilt rising, the programmed response to fix everything, to make her happy. Then I remembered the forged signatures, the gaslit phone calls, the 18 months of hidden debt. You need to leave, I repeated. She grabbed my arm. Please, Mara. Drop the investigation. We're your parents. I pulled away. You stopped being my parents when you forged my name. That evening, Derek called and demanded I come to a family meeting at our parents' house. I refused. You're being ridiculous, he said. They made a mistake, and you're acting like they murdered someone. Just drop it and move on. Did you know? I asked. Did you know they were using my credit? He hesitated. They mentioned they might need your help with some financial stuff. And you didn't tell me? I thought you'd agreed, he said defensively. Why are you making this such a big deal? Because it is a big deal, Derek. They stole $175,000 using my name. The line went quiet. I don't think he'd known the full amount. Just come to the house, he finally said. Let's talk this through like adults. I knew it was a trap. They'd ambush me with guilt and manipulation, trying to make me back down before the bank call tomorrow. But part of me needed to face them one more time. I agreed to come. The family meeting was exactly what I'd expected. My parents sat on the couch looking wounded and betrayed. Derek stood by the fireplace like a judge. My grandmother was even there, crying quietly in the corner. Mara, how could you do this to us? My father asked, his voice breaking. I didn't do anything. You forged my signature. We were trying to save our home, my mother cried. We raised you, and this is how you repay us. By destroying us. Who forged my name? I asked, looking directly at my father. Who sat down and practiced my signature until it looked real enough to fool a bank? Silence. Answer me. My father looked away. It was supposed to help all of us. The plan was to refinance, lower our payments, and eventually put you on the deed as part of your inheritance. You were always going to benefit. That's not how inheritance works. And I never agreed to any of this. My grandmother spoke up. Mara, they're your parents. You need to forgive them. I felt something inside me break. The bank calls them tomorrow. The investigation is happening whether I drop it or not. This is out of my hands now. My mother's face twisted with rage. You did this on purpose. You want to see us suffer. I stood up. No. I just wanted to protect myself. But you couldn't even let me have that. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone on speaker, waiting for the call to start. Victor had sent me the dial-in information, and I joined the line early, my microphone muted. At exactly 10 a.m., Victor's voice came through. Good morning. This is Victor Chun, fraud investigator with Coastal Federal Bank. I'm joined today by Mr. and Mrs. Rivera. This call is being recorded. My mother's voice, tight and controlled. Yes, we're here. I need to ask you both some questions regarding the refinance application submitted under your daughter Mara Rivera's name. Mrs. Rivera, did your daughter authorize this loan? Of course she did, my mother said immediately. She offered to help us. She begged us to let her co-sign. My heart pounded. She was lying so easily, so confidently. Can you tell me when and where she signed the documents? Last Christmas, at our kitchen table. She signed everything in front of us. Victor paused. Our records show the documents were electronically signed from an IP address registered to Mr. Rivera's workplace. Mara was not present. Silence. We also have handwriting analysis showing the signature is a forgery. My mother made a choking sound. Mr. Rivera, Victor continued, did you sign your daughter's name on these documents? My father's voice was shaking. I just copied her signature to save time. She'd already agreed, and we didn't want to bother her at work. It was just to speed up the process. That is textbook signature forgery, Mr. Rivera. But she knew. She knew we were doing this. Do you have any documentation showing she authorized you to sign on her behalf? Silence. Any text messages, emails, or written consent? No, but she'd given us her social security number. Why would she do that if she didn't want to help? According to Mara, you told her it was for insurance paperwork. She's lying, my mother screamed. She's making this all up because she's angry we didn't give her enough attention as a child. This is revenge. I closed my eyes, listening to her unravel. Victor's voice remained calm. Mrs. Rivera, we also flagged a second account, a home improvement line of credit opened 18 months ago, also under Mara's name. Can you explain that? I don't know anything about that. My mother said quickly, the billing address is your home. The line went silent except for my mother's rapid breathing. Based on this conversation and the evidence we've gathered, Victor said, the bank is ruling both loans as fraudulent. The refinance will be reversed, and the home improvement line of credit will be flagged. Both of your credit profiles will be investigated as well. What does that mean? My father asked, panic rising in his voice. It means you'll be held responsible for the fraud. The original loans will need to be addressed, and you may face legal consequences. My mother's voice turned shrill. Mara, I know you're listening. How could you let them do this to us? We're your parents. Victor ended the call shortly after. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling numb. It was done. The truth was on record. There was no going back. I thought I'd feel relief, but all I felt was grief. Over the next week, extended family members started reaching out to me with apologies. My Aunt Brenda shared screenshots in a family group chat showing years of my parents' financial manipulation, not just with me, but with multiple relatives. Cousins who called me selfish suddenly went quiet. My uncle, who'd accused me of being dramatic, sent a short text. I didn't know the whole story. I'm sorry. The family's perception of my parents was crumbling. People who'd always seen them as loving and generous were realizing they'd been played too. My grandmother called me, crying. I didn't know they forged your signature, Mara. I thought you'd agreed to help, and then change your mind. I'm so sorry. I told her I understood, but the hurt didn't go away. She believed them without question, just like everyone else. Derek called, his voice subdued. Mom and Dad are falling apart. The bank froze their accounts, and they're talking about losing the house. I didn't realize it was this serious. I tried to tell you. I know. I'm sorry. With the refinance reversed, my parents had to face their original mortgage debt, plus the home improvement loan they'd taken out in my name. Their monthly payments had nearly doubled, and they didn't have the income to cover it. Victor called to update me. Your parents' home has been placed under financial review. Given their debt-to-income ratio and the fraud investigation, the bank is considering foreclosure proceedings. I felt guilt twist in my stomach. They're going to lose their house because of me. No, Victor said firmly. They're going to lose their house because they committed fraud, took out loans they couldn't afford, and lied to everyone involved. This isn't your fault, Mara. Logically, I knew he was right. Emotionally, I felt like I destroyed my family. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my childhood bedroom in that house, the dinners around the kitchen table, the Christmas mornings. All those memories were now tainted by what they'd done. I'd wanted justice, but justice hurt more than I'd expected. 2 weeks later, my mother showed up at my workplace. Security called me down to the lobby, and I found her pacing near the entrance, her face red and furious. This is all your fault, she screamed the moment she saw me. We're losing everything because you couldn't just help your own parents. You stole from me. We gave you life. We gave you everything, and you repay us by destroying us. People were staring. My coworkers had stopped to watch. You forged my signature and stole $175,000, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourselves. She stepped closer, her face twisted with rage. You've always been selfish, always so worried about yourself. We should have known you'd turn on us. I'm done being your insurance policy, I said quietly. She slapped me across the face. Security immediately intervened, pulling her back as I stood there, my cheeks stinging, tears streaming down my face. They escorted her out while she screamed about betrayal and ungrateful children. I went back to my office, locked the door, and finally let myself break down. That night, I blocked my parents' numbers, their emails, and all their social media accounts. I couldn't keep exposing myself to their rage and manipulation. Every conversation left me feeling guilty and broken. Derek tried to play mediator, but I blocked him too. He'd chosen their side, and I couldn't keep defending myself to people who'd already decided I was the villain. My apartment felt quiet for the first time in months. The constant calls and messages had stopped. The guilt trips and accusations were gone. I sat on my couch and just breathed. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from Coastal Federal Bank. My hand shook as I opened it. The letter detailed the bank's final ruling. The refinance loan was officially voided due to fraud. The fraudulent signatures had been documented and reported. My parents' credit had been red flagged by multiple agencies. They were barred from refinancing or opening new lines of credit for 7 years. The home improvement line of credit was also voided, but the bank had already sold the debt to a collections agency. My parents would have to settle with the collectors directly. At the bottom of the letter was a note from Victor. Your credit has been cleared of all fraudulent accounts. You're free. I read the letter 3 times, letting the words sink in. It was over. I'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives. My parents had been forced to confess to the extended family about the fraud. The perfect image they'd built for decades had finally collapsed. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt tired. Over the next few months, I rebuilt my life. I opened a new bank account at a different institution. I set up credit monitoring alerts so I'd know immediately if anyone tried to use my information again. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma. For the first time in my life, I had boundaries. Real ones. And I didn't feel guilty about protecting them. I accepted a promotion at work, something I'd been too emotionally drained to pursue before. I moved to a nicer apartment in a different neighborhood. I started saying no without following it with an apology. My Aunt Brenda and I grew closer. She understood what I'd been through because she'd survived it too. We met for coffee once a week, 2 survivors of the same predators. One evening, I checked my voicemail and found a message from my father. His voice was quiet, defeated. Mara, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what we did to you. I'm sorry. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Months later, I sat in my new apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows, and realized I felt safe. Actually safe. Not waiting for the next crisis or manipulation. Just peaceful. People asked me if I regretted pursuing the investigation. If I wished I'd just paid the debt and moved on to keep the family together. The answer was always no. My parents taught me that family could break you. That love could be a weapon. That trust could be stolen and sold for $128,000. But I learned something more important. Healing is something you build yourself. Boundaries aren't selfish. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal. And sometimes, the people who hurt you most are the ones who taught you to never fight back. Forgiveness might come someday. Maybe. But trust? That was gone forever. I set my coffee down and looked around my apartment, this space that was entirely mine, paid for with my own money, built on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I was free. And that was worth everything I'd lost. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.